Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Francesca and I run the Instagram and this YouTube page, both called Francesca, where I discuss life as a British expat living in Paris. So if you don't know already, I came to Paris in 2018 to study for a master's degree in economic and legal translation, which I graduated from in December of 2020. And I have a video already up about the pros and cons of studying in France, which I will link somewhere on the screen, so you should go check that out if you haven't already. Today I thought it would be fun to talk to you guys about visas, and more specifically student visas, because that's pretty much all I know from my own personal experience. And so even though I'm British, I don't come from mainland UK, I come from an island, from a British island, so I'm a non-EU citizen. So even before Brexit and everything going on politically, I needed to have a visa to be here. I think I'm now going on to my third visa. So I have a little bit of experience when it comes to talking about both applying initially and renewing. And of course I will link any resources and things that I talk about down below in the description, so if you are applying for visas or if you're just interested in having a bit more information, you can go and check these out. So when you're applying for your initial student visa, if you're not already in France, which you probably won't be in France, you will need to go to either your local French consulate or your visa centre, and that is going to depend on where you live. So I know in the UK, there are visa centres in Scotland and in London, but other countries you'll just have to Google it and see where you need to go and apply. Also, depending on your nationality and where you're from, you may need to register with Campus France. I didn't have to do this, but I know it's a case for a lot of US students have to register and go through Campus France. So again, give it a Google. Depending on your particular situation, you may need to do this. So in terms of the documents that you'll need, it's fairly simple. There is a lot of documents and it's always best to have originals and at least 2 copies of everything, just to be on the safe side, because otherwise if they need an extra copy and you don't have it, you may need to pay. So it's best to just take more than what you think you're going to need. So you'll need a passport, and your passport must have been issued within the last 10 years and must also have 3 months worth of validity post your leaving date. So if you're planning on being in France from September to July, your passport will need to have an additional 3 months past July. You'll also need copies of any previous French visas that you've had and originals and copies of your visa application form. Next up, you will probably need some visa style or passport style photos, just, the ones that you can get done in photo booths, or you can get them done professionally depending on your preference, but you'll need at least 2 of these, but it's always best to take more. And then for the documents specific to the student visa, you will also need a copy of your acceptance or enrolment letter from your establishment, so whether that's your university or wherever it is that you're enrolled. You will also need proof of financial means, and that's something I will discuss in a little bit more depth in a minute. You will probably also need tickets showing your departure date. And some sources I've looked at have also said that you will need proof of medical insurance. Now, I don't personally remember having to provide this, and I think that's because I was under a certain age. If I remember rightly, when I saw the list of documents when I was applying, it was if you were over a certain age, you wouldn't be covered by the social security regime, so you would need to provide separate medical insurance, and I think this can vary depending on your nationality as well. You will also need proof of accommodation. Again, we're going to discuss that in a little bit more depth in a minute. And finally, you will need proof that you've paid your visa fees if you are required to pay these in advance. I wasn't, I paid these at the end of my appointment. So for the documents that we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth, you have proof of enrolment or acceptance at your French educational establishment. So for me, I was accepted to the University of Paris-Nanterre, and I basically just needed to provide my official letter. So I actually sat entrance exams, and after these entrance exams I had an interview, and then following my interview I was sent a letter confirming that I had been offered a place. I then had to accept this place, and then I received an official letter in the form of an email just saying that I had accepted my place and I was going to be enrolled at the university. So this letter should preferably be signed, stamped if possible, but it can be a scan, and it should be on an official university letterhead. So proof of financial means, basically, this is just to ensure that you aren't going to be reliant upon the state and that you can fund yourself throughout your studies. What they basically need is to show that you have enough money to cover your day-to-day living costs. So this needs to be roughly the equivalent of 615 euros per month for the duration of your time. So if you're going to be enrolled for 10 months, you'll need to have 615 euros per month for 10 months. I personally was very lucky. I've been working part-time since I was 14 in various different jobs, so I had a lot of money saved up. And so I provided a copy of my savings account, which showed I had the equivalent to the necessary amount. And so obviously during my first year, I'd used a decent amount of this money. And so when it came to renewing, I provided something called an attestation de prise en charge, which was essentially a letter from my parents confirming that they were going to take care of me financially for the duration of my second year. And alongside this, I also had to provide copies of their passports and copies of their bank statements, showing that they had the sufficient funds to look after me. And so when I got my extension, which I received earlier this week, which was an extension due to the pandemic, everything got pushed back a term, I provided them with a copy of my internship contract, which showed that I had the equivalent amount in euros coming in each month. You will need to check with your local authority whether or not they're going to need these to be translated or whether they're going to need these to be certified as well, because I personally didn't have to certify mine, but I know that some students have had to have certified copies. So proof of accommodation for me personally, I found was the most difficult thing to provide, because you obviously don't want to sign a long-term lease on something that you haven't been able to physically see in person. So what I did first of all was I went to a website called La Carte de Coloc, which is basically a website of people looking for roommates, flat shares, house shares, that kind of thing. And I met this couple who had a room that they were renting out. They're about the same age as me. We FaceTimed a little bit, we talked a little bit, and then they offered me their spare room. And so then my French roommate, he provided me with something called an attestation d'hébergement, which basically, because obviously I had no bills or anything and there was no rental contract, he provided me then with a letter that said he planned on housing me for the duration of my studies, alongside a copy of his passport and a copy of his proof of address. So now I live in my own studio. You might have seen my studio tour. It's gone really popular, which was amazing. I will link it if you haven't seen it already. But so when I was renewing, I obviously wasn't living with my roommates anymore, so I just provided a copy of my rental contract, and then later on when I was renewing my extension, I provided copies of my Wi-Fi bill. If you don't want to do something like that, what you can do when looking for accommodation, and I can make a whole separate video on this if you want, because I wouldn't recommend signing for a private lease before you've seen it, and it's very easy to get scammed. There are scammers everywhere out there preying on students especially. So you could specifically look for student accommodation, because that's a little bit more regulated, and I've had friends that have done that. Or what I would probably recommend doing is hiring either a hotel or an Airbnb for say the first 3 months, and that way you at least have an address. And then once you've arrived in France, you can start about looking for more permanent accommodation. So once you arrive in France, within the first 3 months of your arrival, you will need to register, and this validates your visa. So this used to be a process where you had to send off letters to something called OFI, the Office of Immigration and Integration, but that's all been completely made redundant now. It's all done completely online, which is so much more convenient. Basically, you just go to the website and you enter in your visa details, your passport details, your date of arrival, that kind of thing, and you pay something called your timbre fiscal, which is just like a stamp duty that you have to pay. It's normally around 65 to 75 euros. And then you'll get confirmation that your visa has been validated. And so then you're good to go for the next year. You may still then be contacted by OFI to have a medical visit. I know I had to have a medical visit when I was an assistant, but I didn't have to have one when I was a student. This can vary, not everybody needs to go get one. But basically what that is they'll send you a letter and you have to go and have an x-ray, they check your eyes, provide your vaccination records, chat with a doctor, and they basically just make sure that you're not bringing anything infectious into the country. When you have a student visa, you're also allowed to work the equivalent of, I think it's 964 hours per year, which is the same as part-time work for the duration of your studies. And you can mix this up, so you could work full-time for 6 months and then not work for 6 months. You could work full-time during the holidays and not work during term time. It's up to you how you split this, but you just absolutely must ensure that you do not go over this, because if you go over your allotted amounts, you can be asked to leave the country. You obviously can also go the other visa routes, such as marriage, PAX, which is called your private life visa, or you can get a work visa, but sponsorship for work can be quite difficult to find. So I think possibly, the student visa is the best way to go. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been relatively clear. If there's anything that you'd like some clarification on or more information, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll try my best to get back to you. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and go check out my other videos and my Instagram page. Bye guys.